The other tune has a lot of classical tune, which I like the most, but this is with the translation, so it was very nice. So I'll read one paragraph to bring up to the speed because we are so dull-headed in the age of Kali. We don't remember anything. During the talk, this is Sasur Maharaj. I was thinking that this was maybe too elevated for the audience, but I was sitting close beside Swamiji, and like the other devotees, I was really enjoying being with him. Always, when you associate with the saintly person, is so sublime. The time is so auspicious. After the gate engagement, Swamiji and his disciple agreed that it was a waste of time trying to rent theaters. It was better to go to Thumbskin Square Park. That was the best place for attracting people, and it didn't cost anything. So we will continue. It was 11 p.m. and only one light was on in Swamiji's apartment, in the kitchenette. Swamiji was staying up, teaching Kirtananda and Brahmananda how to cook. Because the next day, Sunday, they would be holding a feast for the public. Kirtananda had suggested that it be advertised as a love feast, and Swamiji had adopted the name. Although some thought it sounded strange at first to hear him say love feast. The devotees had put up posters around the neighborhood and had made a sign for the window of the storefront. And Swamiji has said he would cook enough for at least 50 people. He said the love feast should become an important part of his ISKCON. As he had explained many times, food offered to Krishna becomes spiritual, and whoever eats the prasadam receives great spiritual benefit. Prasadam meant mercy. So love feast was suggested by Kirtananda Swami Maharaj. His two helpers stood respectfully beside him, sometimes stepping back out of his way as he moved, and sometimes looking over his shoulder as he mixed spices to set a pan over the flame or call for another ingredient. He was stirring a big pot of sweet rice with a wooden spoon. It had to be stirred constantly and slowly adding milk. If the sweet rice burned, it would be ruined. He said, and he handed the spoon to Kirtananda. He next showed them how to make ghee by heating butter in a wok and separating the milk solid from the butter fat. Maybe Sita Kumari is listening. She asked me. And he simultaneously taught them how to make apple chutney. Prabhupada was silent as he cooked. But when Brahmananda asked him how he had learned so much about cooking, Prabhupada said that he had learned by watching his mother. He laughed and said it had not been like it is in the West, where you take a lump of flesh from your refrigerator, throw it in a pan, boil it, sprinkle it with salt, and then eat like an animal. Haribo. And in Korea, he said, they eat dogs, but human beings should eat grains, fruits, vegetables, and milk. And the cow especially should not be killed. While Brahmananda cut the apple for the chutney and put them in a pot for steaming, and Kirtananda stirred and put them, and Kirtananda stirred the sweet rice. Swamiji prepared masala, the basic mixture of spices, which he would soon add to the steaming apples. The familiar smell of a red pepper and cumin seed entered the nostrils sharply as the masala crackled and smoked into the hot ghee in the tiny frying pan. With three separate operations going at once: sweet rice, steaming apples, and the masala. Prabhupada cautioned Kirtananda to stir the sweet rice steadily and scrape the bottom of the pot. And he took the spoon for a moment from Kirtananda's hand and demonstrated how to stir it properly. Prabhupada trained so nicely everybody. Sweet rice, chutney, and certain other dishes would be made in advance of the feast, he explained. But many things would have to be done the next morning. Must be a lunchtime. Prabhupada rose early despite having kept late hours that night before. Here is Prabhupada is setting the example. We should have no excuse. Oh, Prabhu, last night I went to the bed late. And after morning class, he was back in the kitchen. Now, half a dozen disciples sat in his front room and making dough for puris and samosas. He had shown them how to make the dough, and Umapati had kneaded for a while by pounding the soft dough with his fist. But Brahmananda was better at it, soaking the weight of his restless body onto the large lump of dough. As Swamiji entered the room to examine the quality of the puris, his disciple looked up at him respectfully. They were always serious when he was present. He picked up a puri and examined it. It is not to the standard, he said, but it will have to do. Then Amit crumpled, rejects, and oddly shaped pieces of dough. He squatted down beside his helpers, who were trying as best they could, though making a mess. He took a small ball of dough, pressed it flat with his fingers, and then deftly rolled it out until it curled around the wooden pin and then fell off. A perfectly round puri. He held it up, displaying a translucent, thin, perfectly round puri. Haribol. Make them like this, then he said. But hurry. On discovering that the dough was too stiff, Swamiji added a little ghee and then a little milk and kneaded the dough to a softer texture. Quote, everything should be just right, unquote, he said. And his disciples took to their menial tasks with concentrated earnestness. Who among them had ever heard of these things before, puris and samosas. It was all new. And the challenge, something very important. It was a part of devotional service. Swamiji did much of the cooking as he simultaneously supervised his helpers. He was always near, walking barefoot back to the kitchen, then to the front room, then to his own room in the rear. And even when he went to his bedroom, his disciple could see him through the window in the wall. Swamiji saw each of the nearly 1 dozen dishes through its final stages, and his disciple carried them into the front room in the pot, one by one, and placed them before the picture of Lord Chaitanya. There was halwa, dal, 2 sabjis, fancy rice, puris, samosas, sweet rice, apple chutney, and gulab jamun or sweet balls, iskon bullets. Prabhupada had personally spent much time slowly deep frying the sweet balls on a low heat until they had turned golden brown and full. Then, one by one, he had lifted them out of the ghee with a slotted spoon and put them to the soak in sugar syrup. He recognized that these golden ghee-fried milk balls soaked with sugar water were his disciples' favorite prasadam treat. He called them iskon bullets because they were weapons in the war against Maya. He even allowed that a jar of iskon bullets floating in their syrup, he always on hand in the front room, where his disciple could take them without asking permission and without observing any regulated hours. They could take as many as they liked. Kirtananda brought in the samosa filling, which he had prepared from spinach and green pea, cooked to a paste, and which the Swamiji has heavily spiced. Stuffing the samosas was an art, and Swamiji showed them how to do it. He took a semicircle of dough, shaped it into cone, stuffed it with a spoonful of fillings, and then folded the top over and sealed it. A samosa ready for the hot ghee. Achyutanand carried the imperfectly shaped puris into the kitchen, where he and Kirtananda deep fried them 2 at a time. If the temperature of the ghee, the consistencies of the dough, and the shape and thickness of the puris were all just right, the puris would cook in only a few seconds, rising to the surface of the ghee, where they would inflate like little balloons. The cooks then stood them on edge in a cracked box to drain off the excess ghee. As they completed that last preparation for the feast, Swamiji's disciple washed the steeped dough from their hands and went down to the storefront, where they set out the straw mats and awaited the guest and the feast. Upstairs, Swamiji had a couple of his cooks offer all the preparations to Lord Chaitanya, reciting the Parampara prayers. The first few love feasts were not very well attended, but the devotees were so enthusiastic about the feast prasadam that they saw no disappointment over the scarcity of guests. They were prepared to eat everything. Satsvarup is explaining this incident in his own word as follows. There was something called Brahman spaghetti, which was rice flour noodles cooked in ghee and soaked in sugar water. And there was halwa, puspanna rice with fried cheese balls, samosas, split mung beans fried into crunchy pellets and mixed with salt and spices, puris, gulab jamun, and everything was succulent. That was the word Hayagriva used. Yes, he would say, expressing it vigorously. Everything was very succulent. Succulent. I don't know, I'm pronouncing properly. Eating the feast was an intense experience. We were supposed to be subduing our senses all week, following strict regulations, controlling the tongue. And the feast was a kind of reward. Swamiji and Krishna were giving us a taste of full spiritual ecstasy, even though we were still beginners and still in the material world. Before taking my plateful, I would pray, please let me remain in Krishna consciousness, because it is so nice and I'm so fallen. Let me show Swamiji and let me now enjoy this feast in transcendental bliss. And I would begin eating, going from one taste sensation to another. The good rice, the favorite vegetables, the bread, and saving the gulab jamun for last, thinking I can have seconds and if I like thirds. We would keep our eyes on the big pots, confident that there was as much as we wanted. It was a time of rededication. We all enjoy with completely open relish and sense gratification. Eating was very important. I remember my childhood that I will eat something that I don't like, finish it up fast. So then I can eat those things which is very good, that I like it the most, so I have the taste remain in my mouth. And the problem that I was facing, that when I finish it, they will come and show me because they think that I like those preparations. Then I will have to tell them that, this is not the case. I don't like it, but I don't want to refuse. So I eat it, consume first, so don't bring me again. Hari Bol. Gradually, attendance picked up. The feasts were free and they were reputed to be delicious. Mostly local hippies came, but occasionally a higher class of experimenting New Yorkers or even the parents of one of the devotees would come. When the small temple was filled, guests would sit in the courtyard. They would take their prasadam laden paper plate and the wooden spoon into the backyard garden and sit beneath the fire escape or at the picnic table or anywhere. And after eating, they would go back into the storefront for more. Devotees were stationed behind the pots of prasadam, and the guests would come by for seconds. The other tenants were not very happy about seeing the courtyard full of festive waste, and the devotees tried to pacify them by bringing them plates of prasadam. Although Swamiji would not go down to the temple, he would take a plate in his room and hear with pleasure about the success of his new program. One time, the devotees were eating so reverently that they threatened to eat everything available before the guests had all been served. And Kirtananda had to admonish them for their selfish attitude. Gradually, they were understanding that the Sunday feast was not just for their fun and pleasure, but to bring people to Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada had begun Back to Godhead magazine in India. Although he had been writing articles since the 1930s, it was in 1944 in Calcutta that he had single-handedly begun the magazine in response to his spiritual master request that he preach Krishna consciousness in English. It had been with great difficulty that through his pharmaceutical business, he had managed to gather the 400 rupees a month for printing, finance, and distributed each issue himself. In those early years, Back to Godhead had been Prabhupada's major literary work and preaching mission. He had envisioned widespread distribution of the magazine, and he had thought of plans for spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya all over the world. He had drawn up a list of major countries and the number of copies of Back to Godhead he wanted to send to each country. He sought donation to finance this project, but help was scarce. Then in 1959, he had turned his energies toward writing and publishing Srimad Bhagavatam. But now he wanted to revive Back to Godhead, and this time it would not be done single-handedly. This time he would give the responsibility to his disciples. Greg Scarf, now Gargamuni, since his recent initiation, found a press. A country club in Queens was trying to sell its small AB Dick press. Prabhupada was interested, and he rode out to Queens in a borrowed van with Gargmuni and Kirtananda to see that machine. It was old, but in good condition. The manager of the country club wanted $250 for it. Look at this, bargaining technique of Prabhupada. Prabhupada looked over the machine carefully and talked with the manager, telling him of his spiritual mission. The manager mentioned a second press he had on hand and explained that neither machine was actually of any use to him. So Prabhupada said he would pay $250 for both machines. The country club did not really need them, and besides, the manager should help out. Since Prabhupada had an important spiritual message to print for the benefit of all the humanity, the man agreed. Prabhupada had Gargmuni and Kirtananda load both machines into the van, and ISKCON had its printing press. Srila Prabhupada gave over the editorship of the Back to Godhead magazine to Hayagriva and Rayaram. For so many years, he had taken Back to Godhead as his personal service to his spiritual master. But now, he would let young men like Hayagriva, the college English teacher, and Rayaram, the professor writer, take up Back to Godhead magazine as their service to their spiritual master. In a short time, Hayagriva and Rayaram had compiled the first issue and were ready to print. What is the time? 6:52. Okay. Now let me see this paragraph. I think one paragraph we can read. It was an off night, no public kirtan and lecture. And Swamiji was up in his room working on his translation of Srimad Bhagavatam. Downstairs, the printing of the first issue had been going on for hours. Ramarai had typed the stencils, and during the printing, he had stood nervously over the machine, examining the printing quality of each page, stroking his beard, and murmuring, Now it was time to collate and staple each magazine. The stencil had lasted for 100 copies, and 100 copies of each of the 28 pages, and the front and the back cover were now lined up along two of the unvarnished benches. Raphael had made that summer. A few devotees collated and stapled the magazine in an assembly line, walking along the stacks of pages, taking one page under another until they reached the end of the bench, and gave the assembled stack of pages to Gargamuni, who stood brushing his long hair out of his eyes, standing each magazine with the stapler and staples Brahmananda had bought from his Board of Education office. Even Hayagriva, who usually didn't volunteer for menial duties, was there walking down the line, collating. So I think we should stop here. We should be punctual in our practice. And before we devotees depart, we would like to offer our humble obeisances at the desk of their feet for their kind contributions, taking austerity to wake up from the smooth bed and join early in the morning. Those are my heroes, and I have a lot of respect in my heart for you. So with those thoughts, I would like to offer my humble obeisances at the desk of these wonderful devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhasya kipashindu bhayavacha patitanam pavane